Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Dad was a recovering addict growing up but has had a full-blown relapse since I graduated high school 14 years ago. He's had 3 stable relationships that had led to marriage and ended in divorce. His latest relationship is a rebound from his last marriage, and as he told me at the time, was purely transactional and that he could never seriously date this woman because she's nuts and not smart enough. His words. He told me that she stalked him and broke some of his belongings after an argument, and he was cutting her out for good. I had no idea about anything else about this woman. This was about 5 to 6 weeks into their fling. I called to tell him my wedding details and he mentioned, "I plan to stay a week to give us time to sightsee." I full stop said, who is we?" He said, "My girlfriend." I was like, hell no, do I want that lady at my wedding? You said she was nuts and that you guys aren't serious. Please don't bring a rebound. Well, apparently he had me on speaker and she heard my tone. She doesn't speak English, and for what reason, he decided to translate to her that I talk trash about her, completely shielding the fact that I only heard these things through him. After this, he went full nuclear and married this woman 3 months later for a green card, told me on my birthday he would not attend my wedding, and kept drunk calling me to tell me how awful I am for not inviting her. Fast forward, Dad attended my wedding alone. Did not walk me down the aisle though, and I extended an olive branch but no apology to his now wife. I thought things were okay, except 3 years later, he only reaches out to tell me that I should have invited her to the wedding and how I'm the source of his marital problems. I've had him blocked for months, but recently was thinking of unblocking him because I still miss my old dad relapse and sometimes get glimpses of him, but my husband told me he sent me a Facebook message a month ago telling him how awful he and I were for not inviting his wife to our wedding. Update. His wife has told me he has been hospitalized and jailed numerous times for alcohol-induced injuries and behavior. He's also struck her, allegedly, but I believe it. Clearly I'm not the source of their marital problems. This actually makes me feel better about blocking him. This just happened. I'm still laughing actually. So my job requires business casual, so I dress fairly well. Never been mistaken for an employee though. I was grabbing some stuff for the day at a local Walmart in a town I grew up in. Haven't lived there for at least 20 years, but my job requires traveling, so here I was back in my hometown. I grabbed some stuff to feed me on the drive back to headquarters, and as I walked towards the checkout, some lady just barrels up to me yelling about an employee. And the conversation went like this. "You need to deal with this useless employee of yours." "I'm sorry, I don't work now." She grabs my arm and pulls me over to this poor kid who couldn't have been older than 16 that had a terrified look on his face. He was in ripped jeans and blue hoodie, so obviously he doesn't work here either. "This horrible child won't get me the headphones I want of this case. He's ruining my baby's birthday." "Ma'am, as I said, I don't work here, and it looks like this kid doesn't either. Don't lie to me and try to cover for this bad employee. I want him fired." She got so loud the manager did hear her and walked over. "What seems to be the issue, ma'am?" "This employee," pointing at the kid, "won't get me my headphones. And this," pointing at me, "useless manager won't do anything about it." Manager looks at the kid, then at me, and lo and behold, we know each other. He tells me, "Oh, hey OP, haven't seen you since graduating. Heard you live in X place. What brings you here?" "Stop lying. They both work here and you will fire them." "Ma'am, just because someone wears blue or dresses nicely doesn't mean they work here. And if you continue to harass other customers, I will have to ask you to leave." The manager looks at the kid and says, "I'm sorry son, go on about your business. You did nothing wrong." So the poor kid ran off looking very relieved being out of this situation. Karen wasn't done though. "I want my headphones now."
I will be leaving a bad review on Yelp about your horrible customer service and bad employees.
Ma'am, you can leave any kind of review you'd like. Headphones are in the electronic department and I will page someone to meet you there. But in no way will you find headphones in the produce section. I was trying so hard not to laugh. I'm getting an update later from the manager since he asked for my number, so we could chat sometime. Update. Mark, the manager, called me a bit ago. Karen pulled a Karen in the electronics section because they didn't have the headphones in the color that she wanted. She stormed out and called to file a complaint about an hour later. His boss reviewed the camera footage and knew Karen was full of it. Apparently, she said he threatened to hit her with his gang backing him up. And the poor kid, that was her nephew. She called him to verify things and he confirmed she was a Karen. They ended up banning her completely. It's a small town and it's the only big store, so that's gotta be an inconvenience. Guess she will have to drive 3 hours to the next closest store to get those headphones. I live in a small town outside of the city. I'd wake up in the morning, freshen up, then head to the local restaurant in town to have my coffee and breakfast. There was a well-known Karen frequenting that place as well, sadly, but I tried my best to stay away from the nonsense she'd pull from time to time on different kinds of people there. Not sure why the manager or owner of this place kept tolerating her for that, but oh well. That one morning, I took my usual and headed for that local restaurant to have the usual before going to work. When I arrived there that day, there was a table there occupied by some military soldiers, obviously waiting for their order. I don't give it much thought and just head to the table in the corner as usual and wait for the waitress to come take my regular order. Enter Karen. She gets in, takes a look at the soldiers, then moves in their direction. I mumble to myself, oh no, here we go.
Hey, you need to move. This is my table.
She tells him. One of the soldiers answers her, what do you mean your table? Can't you sit elsewhere? She tells him,
are you dumb? I said, this is my table. Move.
The guy was ready to get into it with her, but what seemed to be like his sergeant signed to him to stop and ordered the guys to get up and sit on the next table. There you go, ma'am. Have a good day. He told her while everyone was emptying the table. She had an annoyed look on her face while they were leaving her table and even spit on the floor right behind them. And right after the military fellas settled on a different table, she walked right up to them, slammed her open hand hard on the table, and told them that this is her table too, and that they can't sit there as well. She was clearly asking for it. I don't know what her problem is with these guys, and I personally never saw them before, but they seemed very peaceful and didn't want any trouble. Once she does that, the one soldier from before stands up and tells her to go pound sand because they are not going anywhere. She starts shouting at them loudly and eventually the manager steps out from the back to see what's going on. Oh, Karen, not again for God's sake.
What? These jerks are sitting at my regular table. I just want to have my meal where I usually have it.
You know what? No. You either sit your behind down calmly on any other table and keep to yourself, or you just get the hell out of my restaurant and never set foot in here again. I've had it with you.
What? You're kicking me out after all I've done for your miserable restaurant? I'm single-handedly responsible for the wealth you've hoarded while being here by coming in here regularly and dining at your crabby place.
You what now?
You heard me. So if you want me out, you better give me all the money I spent here since you can't treat your customers with enough respect. I demand you hand me $100,000 in cash right this moment, and I shall be on my way.
What is this nonsense? You clearly lost your mind. Leave now or I'm calling the police. Seriously. With some back and forth, the workers manage to push her out of the restaurant, and it gets a bit quiet. The manager/owner apologizes to the soldiers and for the rest of us customers in there for the morning show and lets us know that he's serving everyone a free apple pie for the nonsense we had to witness. 20 minutes goes by and the soldiers have had their breakfast and pies by that point, and they were ready to pay and leave. And the moment they stepped out of the restaurant, who will pop up right in front of them out of nowhere. Of course, it's her, the Mad Karen. She stops them and starts yelling,
"I will show you for showing up here, disrespecting me, and getting me kicked out of my own restaurant in my own town."
She then pulls out a pocket knife from her hoodie and opens it, then charges towards the one soldier that didn't feel like putting up with her crap earlier. But before she reaches him, the sergeant gets in front of her, grabs the hand that's holding the knife, twists her arm behind her back, knocks the knife out of her hand, and pushes her face against the ground, pinning her down. He then calmly asks the manager to call the police. It took the cops around 15 to 20 minutes to arrive, and during this time Karen kept crying and yelling that she's sorry and that she didn't mean to do so, and that he was really hurting her arm and to please let her go, or at least get her up and sit her down somewhere because it hurts everywhere. The sergeant informs her that he will get her up, but on one condition, that she will behave until the cops arrive and sort this whole thing out. She nods and agrees, and that's what he did. He lets go of her and allows her to stand up and adjust her clothes and all of that. Though the moment she finishes tidying up herself, she charges at him again and tries to take a swing at him. But it seemed as if he anticipated that. It's like the guy was basically waiting for it. And with the fastest reflex I've ever seen, he delivered one of the smoothest, most amazing right hooks I've ever seen. And the second his fist connected to her face, lights out. She got knocked out instantly. Cops arrived shortly after that, and they didn't even bother calling an ambulance or anything like that. They just kept trying to wake her up until eventually she started responding to them. By this point, they were taking the statements of the witnesses around of what actually happened, and were aware of what went down exactly this morning in front of that restaurant. Karen was taken in the back of their car, and they drove off with her. I didn't see her for years after this incident, but I heard she was serving time in prison for what happened that fateful day. Oh, she definitely brought it on herself. Not sure if this is pity or pro-revenge, but it was certainly creative and extremely fun at the time. I live in an apartment building which has end-to-end parking for 2 spaces per apartment, and access to the parking levels 1 to 5 are done via a locked automatic roller door, which people can only get through if they have a remote for it, or sneak through behind someone else. I only have a single car, and sometimes I let my friends park in a space in front of my car if they give me notice, so I generally park at the back of the double space, plus it is easier for my neighbors who have 2 cars. Earlier this year, a random car began parking in front of mine on Friday afternoons, meaning I couldn't go out with my car on Friday nights. Annoying, but not the biggest issue when you live super close to the city. This continued nearly every week for over 5 weeks when I didn't park my car at the front of the bay, which I began doing. But at times I plan to leave the space free for friends coming over or whatever, and the car appeared again. I made repeated attempts to stop this behavior by leaving notes, which escalated into leaving printouts of a photo of the car with a license plate clearly visible, an explanation that if it happened again, I'll press charges and/or have the vehicle towed. Well, it's happened again. And this time I was still there Saturday afternoon when I had been planning on going away with a group of my mates. My guess is someone went out on Friday, got drunk, and decided to pick up the car later, not concerning themselves with the inconvenience it caused anyone else. It clearly hadn't moved, as my aggressive note telling them to get lost was still there sitting limply under their wiper blades. I figured enough was enough. It was time to have the vehicle towed, so I called building management and eventually called the towing company, who refused to help because the space was on the 3rd floor, and they can't get any trucks up to that level because of the height and space restrictions. Ordinarily, most people would be pretty much screwed at this point, and I will admit I briefly considered sitting on the hood of the car until the jerk came to pick it up while sending my mates on their way without me. But they would have had to work out a new arrangement for transport as one car wouldn't have cut it. Fortunately for me, however, my parents only live 30 minutes away and have a garage where I work on one of my cars that's sitting at the tail end of a minor restoration. One of the things I use pretty often is a set of vehicle positioning jacks to jam my project car right up against the wall of the garage to minimize the space it takes up. For anyone that doesn't know, vehicle positioning jacks are basically devices that slot under each wheel. Then lift the car up on hydraulics so you can freewheel it in any direction. Whilst I hadn't originally gone to retrieve them, when I had to take my project car off them, a bright idea came to my head. None of my mates minded spending an extra hour to screw someone over that had interfered with us. So we grabbed the jacks and went back, propped the car up and wheeled it out. 6 guys can easily move around a small hatchback, so we pushed across the level slowly and carefully to an area where there isn't parking, but is a load-supporting pillar with space enough for a car behind it. In a little section of the garage where it isn't lit and is completely out of the way, typically there is a guy on my level that parks a motorbike there, but he isn't meant to, and I doubted he minded. We dumped it between the pillar and the wall, with the noise pointing towards the wall. I took back my angry note, the jacks, and we left to enjoy our weekend. When he came back Monday afternoon after the long weekend, the car was still there, which was no real surprise considering there was only about a foot of space for movement between the pillar and the car, and another foot or so between the car and the wall. From the fact the front wheels had changed, we're guessing they did try to get it out, unsuccessfully. It eventually went later in the week, though I'm not exactly sure how they managed it. And I never saw that car again. Some information. For anyone who doesn't understand how parking in my building works, it's like this. 2 car spaces per apartment, but 1 car goes in front of the other. Hope that clears up why I couldn't just move my car out and leave his where it was. I'm an Australian for anyone who missed my username. A few people have asked why I don't simply park at the front of my spaces. I don't always drive to work, because I live close enough so my car stays home. My mates will need to go into the city every so often, usually happens randomly like once a week. So if I leave my car at the front of the bay, I would either need to go home to move it or tell my mates they are out of luck. I would rather not take away a benefit to my friends, all because the occasional guy and single persistent one at that wants to freeload too. At least my mates buy me a drink or pay for my gas occasionally. Plus the person parking in my space illegally is the one doing something wrong here, not me. Police also will not help unless the vehicle has been there long enough to be considered abandoned. However, side that I'm within my right to have the vehicle moved or towed, which as I pointed out won't happen because of the difficulty unless I pay a ridiculous removal fee, which is greater than the impound charge. Around Christmas time I bought myself a new motorcycle. I figured I would use one of my unused CCs for gear, gas and so on. And by CCs I mean credit cards. I made a few online charges from reputable retailers in preparation for a 900-mile trip in a week. After my trip and about 30 credit card charges later, I got a fraud alert from Bank of America and the text detailed the last 5 charges, all gas stations. No biggie, I made them. The next day I get a call from the fraud department asking about the $2,100 in charges. And I flipped. They refunded and contacted the 2 retailers. They got me a new credit card but I was told it's been handled. I was pretty sure I hit a skimmer. Fast forward a month later I got another charge. Turns out there is some Visa agreement that retailers can force charges through even with old numbers. So I call up retailer number 1 and the automated system recognizes my number and greets me. I've never even heard of this company. It wasn't my name, and I've had my phone number for about 12 years. So I say yes, and have the nice robot give me an order history. Sure as heck, the date and purchase amount match. So I get an operator and ask to verify the address because I never got it. Address turns out to be a specific country importer. I figured it was bogus. Then it hit me. Skimmers won't get a phone number off a Meg's trip. That narrowed it down to 2 transactions I did over the phone. One was Geico, and the other one was a motorcycle parts company. Now the company we will call MPC was based out of New Jersey. Coincidentally, that's the shipping addresses. So I call retailer number 1, give the credit card number used, and the shipping address, and he pulls up the order. I'm pretty blunt with him about why I'm calling in. I was able to squeeze out the phone number, New Jersey area code. So I do a reverse lookup of the number, and finally I have a name for my thief. So after more digging, I found her on LinkedIn, and she listed MPC as her employer. Next step is I call MPC and guess who answers? I asked for a manager. He's conveniently out of town. She left a note and my callback number on his desk. Next week I call again. And guess who answers again? Guess who's also in a meeting? I give it one more shot the next day at 2 p.m. or so. Plenty of time for lunch. Meetings should be done. Surely he's there. Nope, he wasn't there all day. At this point I know she's recognizing my phone number and screening my calls. So I grab a Google Voice and put myself in Alabama. Call back around 4 p.m. In my deepest, most southern accent, I asked for the manager. He was helping me and we got disconnected or some sub-story. Sure thing. I finally got a hold of him. So I lay out my case and evidence. He shook and feels betrayed. It was the name of the CSM. He let her go the next morning after she confessed to it. So next I stroll down to the local PD, file a report, give them everything I have. Detective giggles and looks surprised. I'm pretty much handing her on a silver platter. Forwards it to whatever NJ precinct so they can file charges against her. Thank you for watching and see you next time.